gaming media has become accessible now more than ever. Things that occur behind closed doors to consumers are now much more well known to the public, as opposed to the 90s and most of the 2000s, where developers very much kept to themselves and relied heavily on published media to share news of any development regarding games. That being said, it's no surprise that several of these games from the past have been surfacing with new information, beta demos, concept art, etc., etc. And as is the case for the revisiting of my Unreleased Vectorman sequels video. And so in today's video, we'll be looking at the real Unreleased Vectorman sequels. In June of 2018, I made a video regarding the unreleased third sequel to the Vectorman series, in addition to the 3D Vectorman pitch that was made by Pseudo Interactive. Now this garnered a decent amount of views and people seemed to like it, and rightfully so, as Vectorman has garnered a cult following. That being said, I was contacted a few months back by a viewer of my Vectorman video. This user claimed that the information that was being spread for all these years about the unreleased Vectorman Neo game was not the initial Vectorman Neo that was originally pitched, and that he had official documented proof that was created for Sega. Now in today's world of ongoing social media trolls and fake accounts, everything must be taken with a grain of salt. But something struck me as different with this user's comment. He was humble and straight to the point, and also offered to share more information without being overzealous. So I shared my email with him, and what I would come to find would be something amazing that I never thought would happen. The user would identify himself as Jason Weesner, the original designer of Vectorman 1 and 2, as well as the document designer of the game that was supposed to be Vectorman Ultra. Now Jason wasted no time in kindly sharing his Vectorman documents with me, and honestly they all appeared to check out as legitimate. And of course I had to do my due diligence and check out the sources. And sure enough, he checked out. This was the Jason Weesner, one of the developers of Vectorman. So I immediately started checking out the documents more, and a barrage of questions started running through my head. Now keep in mind that I was extremely hesitant to bombard Jason with all of my questions, to avoid getting him overwhelmed or possibly annoyed. So I stuck to just a few questions that I thought were important enough. And the following is an excerpt of our Q&A exchange via email. Shoutouts to the boy BobChu. Hey Jason, so who did you work for when you worked on Vectorman? What was your title and what was your role?
I work for Blue Sky Software in San Diego, California. I was originally hired as a QA tester and then a junior programmer. My goal was to work as a game designer, but Blue Sky didn't have dedicated game designers. Artists made the art and level design, programmers did the gameplay mechanics and tuning. Management's thoughts on design were that everybody is a game designer, and if we credit one person as a game designer, everybody else will get upset. When I left Blue Sky after 5 years and went to Activision, I was finally given my first game designer credit.
You stated you created design documents for Vectorman Ultra for the Saturn. Who headed this project and what company was involved?
This was still at Blue Sky Software. They came by our offices and showed us prototype Saturn hardware, along with Panzer Dragoon and Clockwork Knight. I was blown away. Based on what I saw, I knew that the hardware would be perfect for a next-gen Vectorman title. I approached my boss and pitched him on the idea of creating a game design document to present to Sega. I worked closely with one of our concept artists, Elias Goodson, to create the document.
Are there any specific, interesting, or special details you can share about the Vectorman Ultra project? Any information regarding the plot or anything like that?
Everything should be in the document I provided in relation to story and plot. Some of the additional ideas we were thinking about revolved around multiple Vectormen and taking the action into different planets.
You mentioned a falling out with Sega. Can you provide any details regarding why there was a falling out?
I'm not privy to anything other than the broad strokes. At one point, Sega made an offer to buy Blue Sky Software. It seemed like a natural fit given the company's history. A couple of months after the deal was supposed to go through, Blue Skies pulled out and decided to go independent. At that point, other than a few more sports titles, Blue Sky's relationship with Sega was dead. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but I'd gotten the indication that management thought Blue Sky was worth more money than Sega ultimately offered.
Now, you mentioned you worked with another company to work on Vectorman Neo. Who was involved in this project and how far along did it actually get?
I made a couple of ill-fated decisions in relation to my career, which found me returning to Blue Sky Software in 2000 after they'd been acquired by Titus. The less said about Titus, the better. Really a dreadful company. And Titus had a bunch of licenses which they wanted Blue Sky to work on. One of them was a PS1 port of N64 Superman. Another one was the Blues Brothers 2000 game. Myself, a producer, and the lead programmer really hated working at this incarnation of Blue Skies. So we quit and started our own company called V-Blank. In the process of looking for contracts, we were contacted by Sega, who had a list of Sega Genesis properties they wanted to develop for our next gen. This includes games like Wonder Boy, E-SWAT, and Vectorman. Produced a PS2 demo for Vectorman, which had the character running around some alien ruins. The character was fully functional and looked terrific. We were very proud of what we had accomplished, but Sega suddenly told us that Vectorman is not a character that gets mentioned around the water cooler, and so we never even got to present our demo.
Are there any conceptualizations of this Vectorman Neo game that you can share? Any interesting features or story specifications?
Not really. At least, not yet. There's been a lot of renewed interest in Vectorman recently, so I'm hunting down some materials from friends/coworkers.
Why do you think Sega was not interested in your visualization of Vectorman Neo?
A poor American management team who had no idea what they were doing. This was around the time that Dreamcast was being discontinued and the company was transitioning to a software-only developer. Sega of America was running on fumes. I remember visiting their San Francisco offices a couple of years later. They were almost completely empty except for some people working on the Wii version of Nights. It was very depressing compared to the company that had existed even 4 or 5 years earlier.
Is there anything you can share about the Pseudo Interactive's version of Vectorman?
It was basically a third-person Halo-type shooter. Everything about it was incredibly generic in the 10-minute demo I played. Clearly nobody in development or Sega's management had any idea what to do with the property other than use name recognition to sell an unrelated game. I reached out to Pseudo Interactive to offer some feedback, and they basically told me to fuck off. That's the first and only time this has happened. Developers are generally really nice to each other. For example, on the start of forming V-Blank, I reached out to Ted Price from Insomniac Games to ask him some questions, and he was incredibly friendly and responded with tons of great information. I always felt that Metal Arms was a better spiritual successor to Vectorman than anything that Sega was trying to do.
Did you work on anything after Vectorman Neo?
V-Blank was not able to secure a contract to develop anything, so the company went out of business. This was in the days before indie development had really taken off, so we were dependent on publishers for everything. Publishers had very little to offer us other than weird licenses like Aquaman, Arena Football, Roller Derby, etc. After V-Blank, I went on to work on a couple of Tomb Raider games, Sly Cooper, Drawn to Life, and a bunch of other smaller projects.
What are you up to nowadays? Are you working on any projects?
I left the video game industry about 10 years ago to pursue teaching. I now teach game design and development at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco.
Thank you so much, Mr. Weesner.
Please, just call me Jason or Weezy. If there's any additional information I can provide or clarify on answers, let me know. Jason Weesner, 2023.
And there you have it, from the mouth of the dev himself. And so it appears that footage going around for decades wasn't in fact the true runner-up to the Vectorman games. And now, taking a closer look at the documents provided by Jason, let's begin with Vectorman Ultra, the first pitch Blue Sky made to Sega after Vectorman 2. Now, before I continue, I have to say that this document does prove that the leaked photos going around for several years in the past have validity to them, as they match up perfectly with the document Jason Weesner has given me. So, according to the official documents, Vectorman Ultra was to take place 60 years after Vectorman 2. Earth has been ridden of its pollution problem, and science has advanced its Ultra chip, which is an amorphous chipset that allows mainframes the ability to grow and upgrade regardless of any restraints. The prototype robot in charge of producing and upgrading the Ultra chip was named Capital. The issue begins when Capital isn't given any constraints when it comes to the distribution of the Ultra chip AI, and it begins to overpopulate all the robots with the Ultra chip. Humanity becomes aware of the overwhelming amount of robots with the Ultra chip AI and must stop it and prevent Earth's resources from dwindling further. This is where Ultraman comes in the picture, to stop Capital and its machine liberation incentive. In the document, there's also a quick play-by-play of the game intro depicting what the first cutscene would comprise of. We're introduced to the AI robot Capital, and the UN delegates hearing discussing what was happening around the world due to Capital's rapid expansion. Now listen, this document goes very in depth with all of its levels, designs, bosses, and even secrets. So this video would be about an hour long if I discussed everything presented to me. So I'm not exactly gonna do that, but I will hit on some key points that are mentioned. One of which are the levels. The game would have consisted of 11 levels with 4 additional secret levels. The first level took place in an asylum warehouse. This place was described as an old robot storage facility with heavy machinery and antique weaponry. The second level is referred to as the Mega Sludge Barge, set inside a supersized barge that is a 3-part stage with various components. The third level takes place in the New York Trade Commission Center. This is a 200-floor megaplex with a large amount of enemies that would have been a 2-part stage. Level 4 would have taken place in downtown Tokyo, which is pretty self-explanatory. Level 5 is described as a superstructure collision with the Eiffel Tower. Vectorman is pretty much in the center of the Capitol riot revolt. Level 6 is at the North Atlantic oil platform. This particular level is slated as an underwater level in an attempt to take out an oil refinery. Now everyone knows back in the day there always had to be that one underwater level, so I'm assuming this was that level for this game. Level 7 is at the Volga River Transport located in Neo-Soviet territory. That seems pretty interesting. Level 8 is called Valley of the Kings, where Capital converted a location outside of Cairo into a production facility. Level 9 is known as Burning London, described as a majestic blaze, whatever that means. Level 10, you're in the outskirts of Capital, where Vectorman is fighting through Capital Center. And finally, level 11 is Capital's interior, inside the heart of Capital, and where Vectorman has to face off against the Capital mainframe. And then of course there are the 4 secret levels. Wicker Rocket, which is a lost level from Vectorman 1 actually, and is located in China. The Swamp from Vectorman 2. The Derelict Spaceship, another lost level from Vectorman 2. And the Robot Dump. Now, what's interesting is that this Vectorman pitch was also planned to have bonus stages which consisted of first-person VR rounds, where you had to navigate through 3D environments. Along with that is a plethora of upgrades and morphs that Vectorman can perform. Now these include the Glider Sail, Aggro Racer, the Boombox Banshee, the Manta Buoy, Mini Morph, Panther Mech, Twin Blade, and the Vapor Trail. A few of Vectorman's abilities included a discorporate teleporting ability that allows him to fall apart and reassemble in a different area. a fist launch that also worked as a grapple, a big punch attack that is pretty self-explanatory, shield armor, a satellite helper that assists Vectorman during combat and fires at enemies, and a big chest burst that allows Vectorman to essentially become a bomb and cause massive damage. Vectorman's signature M-Ball blast makes a return, a shockwave blast that causes several hits of damage, secret projectiles that home in on an enemy, mortar attacks that fire grenades like projectiles that bounce off the surfaces, and a laser beam. And that's pretty much it. Now there's a lot more in the documents of the pitch with regards to controls and how to perform certain attacks, as well as going much more in depth with the level bosses, and even pitched endings of the game. Now I'm super grateful for Jason for sharing these details with me, and it's also good to know that at least some of the information shared all those years ago had some truth behind them. But now, let's move on to the other unreleased Vectorman game, Vectorman Neo. Not the Vectorman Neo that I previously covered, that Jason Weesner stated wasn't the Vectorman Neo that was pitched, but the real Vectorman Neo, looking at the documents provided. This one isn't as in-depth as the Vectorman Ultra pitch, as it doesn't have much documentation. It's somewhat vague, but you can tell much more time was spent on the conceptualization of Vectorman Ultra. However, Jason Weesner did have a lot in mind for this iteration of the game. Now, first and foremost, Vectorman Neo was in fact going to be released for the PlayStation 2 and be a fully 3D game as confirmed by the official document. Among some of the visual features the game would have had were interpolation, reflection, self-shadowing of Vectorman's character model, and surface damage, which no other Vectorman game had before. Now the plot of the game was quite an interesting one, and it is described as follows. By the year 2098, advances in computer and health technologies have paved the way for a future rich in luxury and leisure. Vectorman has been in storage since the bug invasion of 2046, due to the bankruptcy of his creator, Vectorman Industries. Humanity no longer requires sentient robots to serve them when mindless automatons can easily fit the role of servant, house cleaner, and babysitter. Mankind has never been healthier, more prosperous, or more relaxed. The Tresor PlayCube Z high-end video game system is introduced with great success in the winter of 2098. Millions of units quickly reach the hands of enthusiastic consumers who become entranced with the amazing graphics, immersive environments, and phenomenal gameplay. The PlayCube Z's exhaustive advertising campaign proliferates the world, appearing on everything from buses to banner ads to the Eiffel Tower. However, the next generation game platform is not everything it appears to be. Embedded in the system softwares are mysterious subliminal messages that are pushing players into an entropic trance. Like a virus, the PlayCube Z spreads out through the populace and the world slowly begins to grind to a halt with joysticks in their hands. The world needs Vectorman again. Yeah, the plot of Vectorman Neo was a video game console that is attempting to take over the world. Now, as far as new moves as listed in the pitch document, Vectorman would boast a metallic stick, which is a magnetized stick that can be used to jump or rappel off of metal surfaces. Now, different surfaces would make the metal stick react differently to its surfaces. He would have also had a boot blast smash that would work alongside Vectorman's already established and familiar boot blast. However, if the player presses the jump button a third time before Vectorman lands, it would create a discharge that would damage everything beneath him. And finally, a punch. With all the crazy gameplay demonstrating throughout Vectorman, players would have been able to simply punch enemies that were in close proximity. This would be performed by pressing the shoot button when an enemy was in close proximity. Now, regarding power-ups in the game, They are split into 3 categories: photons, power-ups, and bonus round items. Power-ups are found in random receptacles found throughout, which would include damage modifiers, health boosts, and about the same power-ups used in other Vectorman games previously discussed. Now, the most common and important are photons. Photons are found by defeating enemies and affect the way the game can be played. Photons determine Vectorman's ability to use the morph feature, aside from actually defeating a boss or acquiring their morph feature. Depending on how many photons have been collected, depends on what morph feature could be used. Among some of the morphs are the air morph, which is a gliding morph that allows Vectorman to stay in the air, nanomorph, which allows Vectorman to shrink down to 1/10 his size, water morph, which allows Vectorman to float and fire deadly bubbles while in the water, drill morph, which allows Vectorman to drill through surfaces, and finally the blade morph, which dresses Vectorman in a hula skirt but covered in blades. This allows Vectorman to easily cut through enemies. However, some enemies would be impervious to this attack and would result in a shower of sparks. And unfortunately, that's as far as the pitch to Vectorman Neo got. You can tell that a lot more thought and effort went into Vectorman Ultra's pitch as opposed to this Vectorman Neo. A lot of people could blame that on the 3D polygonal takeover of the late 90s, or the death of the side-scroller as many put it. While that claim has all but been debunked, with retro-style games seeing enormous success such as Shovel Knight, one can't help but wonder, what if? Now, before I close out this video, I want to give a huge shout out to Mr. Jason Weesner for not only shining light on this game, but also taking time off of his busy schedule to speak with me and share all that information. A lot of fans have been asking if I plan on revisiting any of my older videos, as a few discoveries have been made with several of them, and the answer is yes, but only to those that have seen significant discoveries. I have a few on my radar. But with that being said, I wanted to thank everyone for watching our videos and continuing to support by simply watching or just dropping a like or a comment. It really means a lot to us, and it's getting harder and harder for us to make these videos due to this not being our full-time jobs. But either way, thank you guys for watching. Check out some of our other videos if you'd like. Check us out on our social medias and our Twitch. And be sure to check us out on Discord for any conversation or suggestions for unreleased or beta gaming videos. And I'll catch you all next time.